there, everyone. My name is Amy Wolf, and I will be your moderator for our panel, Unraveling the Mysteries. And we're going to cover all of the different genres and subgenres of mystery, including thrillers and suspense. So, the first question that I'd like to address is, who are we? So I'll start. Again, my name is Amy Wolf. I'm mainly a fantasy writer. I've published about 15 books, and I just finished my first mystery, which was really fun because there's a fantasy angle. It's essentially one's a dame, one's a dragon, they're detectives. So that's me. Lee?
Lee Lindauer is my name. I've been writing for 15 or so years. I have two books out, and a third one coming out in July, and mainly they're thrillers, but I guess this latest one's kind of a mystery thriller, kind of changes the genre slightly on that.
Cool. And Donna Lee.
Thanks for having me. My background is in journalism, and I have recently moved into creative writing and fiction writing. And so I have two mysteries, traditional mysteries, already published, and two more on the way. Fingers crossed.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's start off by telling everybody what is our favorite mystery or thriller or suspense novel, and who is our favorite author. They might be the same. So again, I'll go. Guys, I am a classicist. Yeah, what can I say? I love Sam Spade and Philip Marlowe, those hard-boiled noir detective novels of the 30s and 40s. So, of course, Dashiell Hammett and It'll Come to Me, the author of Sam Spade, are my favorite mystery writers. How about you, Lee?
Well, I kind of like some of the old stuff myself. On the thriller end of that mystery spectrum. I guess way back when I was young and I read Count of Monte Cristo, that kind of got me, a flame kind of going that this is kind of neat stuff. It really keeps you on the edge of your seat. And, for somebody who didn't read a lot back then, I really caught on to that. And then, of course, if you want to even go back further than that, you could read Homer's Odyssey, but I'm not going to do that. But there, that kind of got me going into that direction a little bit. And when I started writing about 15, 20 years ago, I started to read a little bit more on a pace that was pretty good. And of course, when Dan Brown came out with Da Vinci Code, I think that changed the whole game at that point in time. And everybody was into reading thrillers and so forth. And so from that point on, I'd say he's one of my favorite present day writers. And of course, I still get back to the old stuff like, I hate to say it, but Dracula is a thriller. In some respect, it's kind of a horror thriller, and I've kind of enjoyed that realm recently by reading some of. I don't know if you folks are familiar with Dan Simmons. He's written.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's
crosses genres, unbelievable.
And he's amazing.
Such a prolific writer. I mean, he gets a little wordy, but his stuff is just amazing.
I've been
research he puts into that.
I've been a fan of his for a long, long time.
If nobody's ever read him, it's a treat. Let's put it that way.
Yes, and he does great science fiction as well.
Great, and I'm struggling through one of his science fiction ones now, but the stuff he comes up with is just incredible.
Oh yeah, he's been around for a long time. How about you, Donna Lee? Who's your favorite mystery writer and your favorite novel in the genre?
Well, I'll tell you, you're both reminding me that it's all about where we start. So I started with Nancy Drew, where a neighbor said, I think you might like this. And it was my
Yes.
first mystery. And it was the first time I realized that the book could be interesting and it could be a puzzle. And I went from there to Agatha Christie, who is more puzzle than anything, but I liked the puzzle. And then I think in the 90s, I discovered people like Tony Hillerman and Martha Grimes. So I discovered that you could have a story and characters that came to life, but you could also have this fabulous puzzle. And I think with books like Where the Crawdads Sing, I'm also now beginning to realize that you can actually have writing that is undeniably evocative and beautiful while still making me want to figure out who did it.
Right.
And
Right.
so,
That's
yeah,
great.
there's a spectrum, and wherever I am on the spectrum is my favorite at that time.
Yeah, I too started with Nancy Drew. I must have reread those books
Yep.
20 times. I would get to the end and then I would start again. And yeah, that and the Hardy Boys for, I guess at that time, guys, was the equivalent. So we probably have given clues, but I'd like to ask you guys, what is your favorite subgenre of mystery? Police procedurals, legal, puzzles, as you said, Donnelly, the classic whodunit. I'll start and say you probably guessed that mine is noir, and I must give kudos to Raymond Chandler, who wrote The Big Sleep. Sorry about that. Had a post-con brain fart there. I apologize. And so, yeah, I love the old, noir, hard-boiled, cynical, yet still sentimental with that heart of gold. The characters that, of course, Humphrey Bogart played on screen. How about you, Lee?
I kind of like I like the old stuff myself. Like I mentioned a little bit ago, I kind of am fond of the horror aspect, or maybe the paranormal aspect of thrillers or mysteries, more so than the political or the psychological. I don't know. The psychological seems that doesn't really ring my bell as much as maybe the other, the paranormal aspect, or like my first two books were more international type of thrillers, but things that do have a mystery component to them that I really enjoy. I think the two genres really are kind of one and the same, because in a thriller you're trying to, it's got to be fast paced and so forth.
Right.
And in a mystery, you've got to have there has to be a mystery throughout the thing, and are they
Right.
gonna, so they kind of end up in the same spot at the end, I believe.
Yeah. What do you think, Donnelly?
I think I don't have the guts that either of you two have. If it's going to scare the bejesus out of me, I'm probably not a big fan. That said, I don't tend to be a big fan of cozies either, because they're just a little too neat and tidy and sweet and sometimes saccharine. So I tend to come more up the middle. I like more the traditional mystery. And sometimes that's a police procedural, and sometimes it's a private investigator, and sometimes it's the amateur detective. I do tend to like thrillers and suspense, but I'll tell you, and maybe you can share whether this is your experience. I often find that the plot is very complex. And for me, because I'm a puzzler at heart, it starts to unravel on me. And if all the ducks don't line up perfectly, then I'm not as satisfied in the end with the book as I would have been otherwise.
Interesting. So it seems like we've run the gamut from the old classics up to the present. So speaking of puzzles, Donnelly, I wanted to address how you structure a mystery novel. Now, I had the advantage of actually writing screenplays in Hollywood during my wild youth. And so that structure is really tight. On page 15, this happens, and on page 30, that happens, and you got to bring it all back. So I found that really helped me in plotting my one mystery. And I even used an app called Plotter, Plottr, which basically has a detective template, and you can plot out the beats. Now, of course, a novel is going to be much longer, and I ended up having to add 15,000 words. But as far as the structure, some of the things that I think about in terms of devices that writers use are the red herring, or what Hitchcock called the MacGuffin. In other words, right, it's like we are steering you to believe that this person is the villain and the criminal, but no, not at all. And so it basically sends you down the wrong path. The other thing I like, and this does come from screenplating, is what we know, what the main character knows, and what the other characters know. And if there's a gap, it makes it really intriguing, because we could be like, don't go in the house, but the main character doesn't know. Maybe some of the supporting ones do. And of course, there's always the twist at the end. And basically, you've got to keep up that tone of suspense. You've got to make the reader keep questioning, what happens next? Who dies? Who did it? And, I think it's very difficult, and it has to be so tightly plotted that it squeaks. What do you think, Lee?
I couldn't agree with you more. Excuse me. The reader, it's good that the reader realizes some things, is told some things that the protagonist doesn't know, because that's going to make the reader think, well, when's he going to find out? It's his life is depending on it, or somebody else's life is depending on it. So that's a POV thing, I would think, and it's a good trick that the writer should put in there, is to keep that protagonist from being aware of what's maybe going to save the day, and that'll keep the reader wanting to continue to continue on that path of he's got to find out sooner or later, because the whole world's going to blow up here in a minute. So I agree with you 100% on that. There's, I think, and probably the biggest thing that I think that in mysteries, maybe same as with thrillers for sure, is to don't get, and we all know this, I think, don't give all your information all at once,
No, hold back.
That's one of the first mistakes I started doing when I was trying to learn this craft a little bit, is you got to put it all on the line now, otherwise. But then they said no, and then I could finally realize people don't want to be force fed. You want them to continue to read that book, so they will continue to get a little bit of snippets every now and then that keeps them going, because they want to get that last snippet before the world does blow up or whatever. So that's probably the biggest thing that I can think of.
That's great. What about you, Donnelly?
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned you like to plot it out and have actually used Plotter. And life as a journalist, you do that. You usually don't start to write until you've done all your research, you've done all your interviews, you know who your audience is, you have a sense of the angle and direction you're going to take. But for me, when I wrote my first mystery book, I had a sense of the crime, who committed the crime, why they committed the crime, and a backstory for my very new character to me, but I didn't have much more. And I'm not sure if this has happened to you, but characters that I thought would play a minor role all of a sudden took on a much larger role, or characters that I thought would be milquetoast all of a sudden had this backbone, and I didn't know where it came from. But there's a freedom in being able to run with that. And sometimes you run into a wall and you have to pull back. And sometimes you run down this delightfully wonderful path that you hadn't anticipated, but that you think makes, to your point, Lee, the book stronger for the reader, and also the character stronger should it be a series and you want to continue on with the series.
I mean, that kind of brings up that universal quandary for writers. Are you a pantser or a
Yeah.
prepper, right? In other words, do you fly in by the seat of your pants and you don't know what the heck is going to go on that page until your fingers hit the keyboard? Or like me a little bit, but I'm a combination. I'm a prepper, and especially for my first mystery, I really needed to make sure that, every murder that occurred makes sense, that my red herrings were, distracting enough, that the characters were likable, their relationships, and so on. But as I said, Plotter had me running short because that was just the mystery part of the plot. I did end up having to add 15,000 words. And yes, that kind of was impromptu for me. Okay, what happens now? What are the relationships? So that was fun. And speaking of structure, how do you avoid plot holes? I know for me, it's editing. It's like in the editing process, you go over and over. You're like, oh no, this person can't be here. They were just at the Chinese premiere last night. And hopefully you save yourself from looking like a fool. So how do you avoid those plot holes, Lee?
I don't. I think you can sit there and you can outline till you're blue in the face.
Yeah.
And I think we all try to do that to some degree. We really try to have it kind of set in stone of how this thing's going to work out. But as you start to get into it and you fall into that hole because you didn't think it was there, but it's there. Mm-hmm. I think it's a helpful thing. I think it helps you think while you're down there, now what the heck am I going to do? And sometimes you come out of that because you've found a fork in that hole. There's another direction out than the one you think you had to go out, which means you're just going to can everything that you've done already up to that point. It usually gives you an opportunity to go somewhere else. And I think that found that out a lot in my plotting. I'll go into these things, but then I'll take a fork in the road and say, well, now this is at another dimension. Yeah. And that's really, I like that, what that's done. And by the time you're done with the novel, in my experience, I think you've really got something that it might be a little complex in the thriller aspect of it, but you've got something that really ties together across different areas. And I think the whole can be good for you.
Interesting. What do you think, Donnelly?
Well, I think I'm like you, Amy, in the sense that I like all of my threads to be tied up nice and neatly by the time I close the final page of the book. Right. And so the fear is, have I missed something? Have I missed an inconsistency? Have I said something happened on a Saturday, but it could only have happened during the week? And so I too rely on the editing process, both my own editing and that of the publisher. I also rely on beta readers because it's the fresh set of eyes that will say, oh my Lord, why would they ever have done that? Or they couldn't have done that. Or they could only have done that if. And so to your point, Lee, if nothing else, it makes you think. And it makes you think, you're absolutely right. That doesn't work. That's an impossibility. I have to fix it. Or, you know what? I can make it work. I can go down a path I hadn't anticipated, and look at that. I've come up with something new.
And sometimes that path is, it brings such a different dimension to the book. And I think that's good. It's something you didn't think of at the front, and all of a sudden, wow, that's really adding to what I've got going on here.
Wow. So that really answers the question for those would-be and current mystery writers out there, because plotting is pretty much all, isn't it? I mean, in general, I don't care what you write. I mainly write fantasy, but I still want to make sure that my plots make sense. And that is really true in this genre. So this is something that Lee touched upon, and I think it's really interesting. And those are books that are written like a mystery, but they're not considered that. And for me, it was the whole Harry Potter series, because as I went through it, I thought, this is really written like a mystery. there's all of these MacGuffins, Snape turns out to be good, and we really suspected and hated him, right? She did a great job as far as planting clues, as far as creating suspense. She's not afraid to kill her characters. So we're like, who's going to die next? What happens next? And for me, that sense of suspense carried through the 7th book so much. I actually read it in full on a train from Portland to Seattle. So that's how invested I was. And Lee, you mentioned Dracula. Any others come to mind?
Well, The Shining.
Horror, yeah. Mm-hmm.
To me, the book was great, but I'll tell you, you couldn't beat that movie. I mean, just unbelievable. Right. And it's got to be at the top of all the horror / thriller books or movies that I've ever seen. So that one definitely is at the top. Some of the old stuff like Hound of the Baskervilles.
Right.
We all love that one, I think. And,
Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes and Study in Scarlet and all those are pretty amazing. But, I guess I'm trying to think of any other. Well, I just read one by Dan Simmons. It's not horror. You think it is, but it's not. And it's called The Abominable, about he does a lot of historical fiction in some of those books, and this one's about climbing Mount Everest back in the 30s, and you really think there's an abominable snowman or something out to get him, but no, it's something totally different. That he did a great job in that, and you didn't find that out until the end of the book.
Wow, cool. Any books come to mind for you, Donna Lee?
Well, it's an interesting question because I'm a member of the Crime Writers of Canada, and to be a member of the Crime Writers of Canada, you have to write about crime, and they don't care whether it's fiction or nonfiction or short stories or mysteries or traditional mysteries. So I think the points that both of you are raising is the primary purpose of the book a mystery that unravels, and we want to go along with the unraveling to figure out the solution? Or is the mystery kind of a backstory? And what's more important is what's happening to the characters or the family saga or the horror. And so I find that I will read a book. I think I just finished The Paris Apartment. And definitely her brother goes missing. So there's a mystery there. But it became less about the mystery for me and more about the interconnections between all of the characters. And I must say my preference is more for the mystery. So I like it when the mystery is front or center. And being Canadian, Margaret Atwood, of course, has written numerous books that have a mysterious element to them. But the ultimate intent of the book is not that it be first and foremost a mystery. It is first and foremost something else. So I think for Amy's point about all the writers and new writers out there, knowing in your heart what this is and what you want it to be.
Right. Well, that's interesting because sure, there are an awful lot of books and it doesn't really matter what the genre is. It could be science fiction, fantasy, Westerns, where the mystery is backgrounded. And probably that's what keeps you reading, right? Along with the characters and their relationships. So I wanted to kind of address the history of mystery. Didn't mean to rhyme, but what it is how do you guys see that the genre has changed over the years? I mean, of course, we start off with a hard-boiled male detective, right? And women are kind of playthings. And those who indulge in, I won't say it for YouTube, generally have to die, okay? So that they learn their moral lesson. But now, for example, with V.I. Warshawski, which I love, and I think this was written fairly early on, 90s, suddenly there's a hard-boiled woman detective, which is amazing. So what do you see as the changes in terms of representation of, say, detectives or crime solvers over the years. Lee?
Well, I agree with you. I think, the old stuff definitely was all male oriented,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much. In say the thriller genre and the mystery genre two together, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You had, in the thriller genre, you had things like Robert Ludlum and I
Right.
can't remember the Le Carre. I can't.
Oh, right.
Who wrote the Jackal? That type of stuff way
Yeah.
back when.
Yeah. I think it was John, however you pronounce his name. I'm sorry. I think it's
Le Carre or something. Yeah, or something
Le
like
Carre
that.
or Le
Yeah.
Carre. Yeah.
Le Carre, yeah. But nowadays, I think, you're seeing more women-oriented
Mm-hmm.
protagonists in these. In fact,
Right.
my first two international thrillers both had women protagonists in it, and I
Cool.
for
Yeah.
some reason, I don't know why I write about the women
Mm-hmm.
more than a man. I guess I'm getting tired of the men always being the he-man
Yeah.
and does this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I like a
Right.
woman
Right.
who actually has a skill other than just being a woman. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Exactly.
uh,
Exactly.
so I
Right.
think you're seeing a lot more of that, and I think that's the way our society is changing slowly but surely
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to a more equal uh, platform for all.
Good. Yeah. Just like the world. What
Yeah.
about you, Donnelly? What's your opinion?
Well, it's interesting. It's the things you don't think about. I recently attended a talk on Sherlock Holmes, and the fellow Mark Alberstadt was giving this presentation. He's based in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which was just fabulous. But he was talking about the fact that Sherlock didn't write the first, or Arthur Conan Doyle didn't write the first mysteries. That would have been Edgar Allan Poe
Yes,
and
that's right.
others.
It was Poe. Mm-hmm.
But the solution, the solving of the mystery or the solving of the crime was more accidental or happenstance. And it was really Sherlock who used science to find out or deduce what was going on. And so the presentation talked about the fact that all of us who have come after the Sherlock Holmes mysteries have really followed in the footsteps for the most part of Sherlock Holmes. And so it's interesting to think that we're using more and more science as there's more and more science to use.
Yeah.
So there's that technology aspect and that there's that forensic aspect, all of which those details at one time were glossed over or ignored. And the other thing that I'm finding today, which is quite delightful and relatively new, is that there's a sharper and deeper vein of humor in many coming out. So that because perhaps it was a crime, because it was serious, we didn't do that. But as we're developing characters, to your point, Lee, as we're creating protagonists that are three-dimensional and multifaceted, we are coming up with books that also make us laugh as well as engage us.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, I started off with writing, comedic scripts, and that's kind of my thing. So I have a huge amount of humor in my mystery. It's set in the 40s, so there's a lot of, crazy slang, and it's in a way, it's a satire, but not entirely, of those 40s hard-boiled noir novels. And I also wanted to speak to, finally, we've got people of color. As a detective, Walter Mosley has had incredible success with Easy Rawlins, and more and more. I'm sure that there is gay detective fiction out there. I'd be amazed if there weren't. So I think that the diversity of our world, and the acceptance of people who don't fit that, sort of like Sinclair Lewis standard, is a really great step in the genre. And that's why I love V.I. Warshawska's like, whoa, here's a woman. She's tough. Her dad was a cop. She can do self-defense. She can shoot. And she has incredible reasoning. She went to law school, and I just really got attracted to that character. What can I say? So basically, at this point, Lee, is there anything in particular about thrillers that differentiates it from just, say, your, I don't know, police procedural or cozy mystery or detective?
Well, it's supposed to thrill. I guess that's the number one thing. And what does that mean? I mean, you can go on a roller coaster and maybe get a thrill too, but
right. It's more of a mental thrill, isn't it?
It's a mental thrill, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I like that term, but
okay.
I think it's more. I like the word suspense, I guess, because that
There you
ties a
go.
lot more things together.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Right.
thrill's supposed to thrill, and it's
And it
supposed to
better.
be, yeah, it's supposed to be fast paced. Okay, it's
yes.
If you have some slow parts in there, and there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of thrillers I've read that have a lot of slow parts, and I just wonder, man, the heck did they ever get this out there? Yeah, hello.
Yeah,
but
I know.
Then I don't have their name, and they do, and so
I know. Yeah.
It's got to be fast paced. It's got to be just bam, 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 and you guys got to have a lot of little plot twists to take you in little different directions, and that's kind of like the mystery genre itself. You got to have different.
Sure.
And you got to have a cliffhanger. You got to have a cliffhanger. Okay?
Yeah, of course.
Somewhere, and maybe 2 or 3. And
wow,
that might be overdoing it, but all that stuff to keep the reader on the edge of their seat.
Sure, like Dallas. Who shot JR, right?
Yeah, and I don't know. Donna Lee's obviously the expert here on mysteries. I don't know. I don't know if do they have a lot of cliffhangers in mysteries, or is it just solve the crime at the end? Or I guess I'm not following what. It's not like the thriller genre in terms of fast pace, but do you know what I'm trying to say?
I do.
Is there a cliffhanger in there, or is there not?
I think you're absolutely right in the sense that there are similarities between all of the genres, and one of those similarities is that there has to be something that keeps readers hanging on, which means that there's something they want to see to the end. And it could be that someone is literally hanging off the side of the mountain and they want to see if that person is going to fall. Or it could be that we've introduced a red herring or a new character and they want to figure out what is this? What is the significance of this? And I don't know if this is true for you two, but the genres within mystery are getting finer and finer and finer. But the agent publishing world is also now defining books in ways that it never has before. So you have book club novels, and you have upmarket novels, and you have women's. And I'm thinking, I don't know what the difference is. Why wouldn't a woman want an upmarket? Why would commercial fiction? So I think after a while, some of those lines are just getting so nuanced. It's hard for us as writers to figure out how to tag this thing that we've created.
No, I understand. I mean, as a fantasy writer, there's a new thing. It's called romantasy. Okay, it's like, wow, I just learned about that one at Emerald City Convention. So yeah, it's romance and fantasy. It's a thing, and it's a very hot thing, and it's, selling millions of copies. So yeah, I guess as a genre ages, it does become more and more granular. But you don't want it to be like, Western heroes named Clint who walk down Main Street, So, hopefully it's not going to get to the point of like ridiculousness, So, you brought up a really interesting point, Donnelly, and that is tech that is being used now, right, to solve crimes. And, here's my question. Now that we have DNA analysis, right, now that we have so many more sophisticated ways of, say, even finding people, right, via computer, via the internet, do you think it makes it harder for our fictional detectives to be puzzled when, these modern techniques seem to be boom, and you've got your suspect? What do you think, Donnelly?
Well, it's an interesting question, isn't it? Several years ago, wrote an article on what they're calling the forensic effect in the criminal justice system, so that juries in particular are expecting during a criminal trial to see all of this forensic, this DNA evidence come forward.
Yeah.
And there was a case where someone was acquitted of a crime, and when the jury was asked, why did you acquit? They said there was no DNA evidence. And in the absence of DNA evidence, they were not comfortable convicting the individual, to which the Crown Attorney said, we do not usually need DNA evidence when the defendant has already admitted to being at the scene of the crime. So it's those kinds of things where, we really do expect the technology to play a role, and we expect as readers that the writer got it right, which I think puts a real burden on us as writers to be current, to be up to date.
Yes.
And so when you look at things like AI, to your point, Amy, with a whole new world unfolding before us, we have to be contemporary. And that's a lot of work staying up to date.
No, it's true. Lee, do you find that all the high-tech stuff, especially, the high-tech weapons of war, does that make writing thrillers harder or easier for you?
I think it's probably making it a little more difficult, because you've got to understand what you're writing about. And I think, with the cell phone generation, all of a sudden, 20 years ago, you didn't hear anybody saying, well, it pinged and he's, pulled it out of his pocket. They went to a phone with the rotary dial and all that kind of stuff. But it's just, it's changing so fast that it's hard. It really is. I think it's going to be hard to keep up with. And like you mentioned, Amy, the AI thing that's happening right now, I think it's going to make it very difficult for writers down the road.
In so many ways. Especially AI written books. Yeah, what a concept. But, from the excerpts that I've seen, to me, they're soulless. The style is terrible. It's a lot of glittering generalities and just a ton of adjectives. And, it's kind of like sentences that don't mean anything really. So I'm hoping that we're all fairly safe. Now, I got to escape this tech conundrum. I'm lucky, because my mystery is set in the 1940s. Okay, I didn't have anything, not even a rotary phone. You had to go into like a dime store phone booth. So, the methods of trying to find the killer were pretty primitive in those days. And it really just required a lot of mental acuity and gymnastics with just kind of a big dose of luck thrown in,
Well, maybe it'll also cause our writers to write more about that era before the high-tech era, because then you don't have to mess with all this stuff you don't know about.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Well, we're kind of winding down to the end of our panel, which has been fantastic. I thank the both of you so much. I know you carried a lot of weight, only being two. So I thought we would take our last moments to talk about our latest mystery novel. So Lee, why don't you go first? Feel free to hold up that book.
Well, I don't have the book to hold up yet because
okay. Then don't.
What I was trying to do is the name of the book that will be coming out in July is called The Salvation of Henry Maxwell. And it's about an old-time horror movie star. Now, it's not a horror book, but he's an old-time horror movie star who's grieving over the death of his wife 40 years ago. And so that kind of drives the plot. And I was trying to think of some kind of, the catchphrase nowadays. They're always saying, find a catchphrase.
Right. Yeah, the log line.
So-and-so meets so-and-so,
Yeah, so Alien meets Jaws. Yeah.
Yeah, my catchphrase I've been fiddling with is called Ebenezer Scrooge Scrooge channels Edgar Allan Poe. So that might give you a little bit of
Wow.
where this thing goes a little bit.
That's
Because
great.
it does have a Poe type ending, but
Hmm.
nobody realizes it until the Poe type ending happens. So
Okay.
it's a very it's a character oriented more so than plot oriented. But I'll have to say the plot is pretty good. So, but that's my
Awesome.
bias. Anyway, it's
How-
called The Salvation of Henry Maxwell, coming out this summer, hopefully in July. I think is the latest I heard, and
Okay.
looking forward to it.
Awesome. How about you, Donnelly? What's your latest mystery
Well,
novel?
My I'm on Blur. My latest is, as I come off of virtual background, my latest is
There you
called
go.
There we go. It's called Conflagration, and it's different for me because it's a historical mystery, and historical mysteries are not my forte. My publisher has a series of a historical mystery in every province and territory in Canada, and unexpectedly she lost her Quebec writer, so I stepped in. So this was a gift in many ways, but it happens in 1734 in Montreal, in what is then New France, and it is a true story of an enslaved Black woman, Marie-Joseph Angelique, who was accused of arson. She was accused of burning the lower town of Montreal down, a massive fire that consumed 46 buildings. But because she was convicted, she was arrested and sent to trial, there is a wealth of information available because, of course, the court process is documented every step of the way. So we get to see her on trial, we get to hear what her accusers have to say, and then we get to look at, was she really guilty?
Ooh,
And I won't tell you where I land.
No, don't. Those both sound really interesting. So I've talked a little bit about mine. I'm going to be real brief, but here's my log line, Lee. One's a dame, one's a dragon. They're detectives. Okay, it's that's simple. It takes place in 40s Los Angeles, and murders are centered around what is really MGM, but what is called Mammoth Pictures. Now, I worked in the film industry. Yes, I'm admitting it publicly, for 15 years. So there's a lot of my personal anecdotes that went into the book. My protagonist, Nikki Forenza, is pretty much tough as nails. She kind of stumbles into owning her own detective agency, and then it's quite a surprise when her new partner turns out to be a dragon. Okay, the title is Too Much Tinsel, and my Kickstarter for the book launches on March 12th. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. I thank you so much for really carrying a heavy weight. And I think that we've delved into mysteries, thrillers, and suspense about as much as anyone can. So thanks very much to you both.